You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show, which, of course, this is almost like when you see those movies that have those bases that like change locations, every time. That's kind of how our schedule is. First it was going to be Friday at 11, normal time, but, then we couldn't do it. Then we were going to do it at 3 today. That couldn't happen. It's like, all right, 9 o'clock, you know what? It doesn't matter what happens. Somebody is going on. So we don't, because I hate that. I hate when it just looks so terrible when we do that. But unfortunately, it's necessary. Wow, Ronaldo's back. Ronaldo. How you doing, buddy?
Ronaldo.
Yeah, I gotta put this
What's
up.
going on, man?
Yeah, I gotta put this up. It's been a while since we've seen Ronaldo, and it's good because this is, of course, yet again another review. So, in case you guys had missed any of our last shows where we were talking about how we were going to run Tales of the Empire, which actually I think we only did that on our last show. I think that was when we said, "Hey, this is how we're going to roll it." Because it's 6 episodes. And unlike almost every other Star Wars show, they actually dropped all at once. And so, of course, instead of taking the next 6 weeks and reviewing like one 14 or 15-minute episode or something, it just made more sense because this thing is very neatly divided into 2 story arcs. Episode 1 through 3 is Morgan Elsbeth, which, of course, is what we're going to cover tonight. And then 4 through 6 is going to be Barriss Offee. So it really just fell into a really nice way to review these things. And there's a little bit more meat, because actually one of the things that I liked about this episode, speaking of which, and I want to get to one of Ronaldo's comments, and tell me what you think about this, but I really like the fact that the way they did this was almost like its own little trilogy, right? It had kind of a prequel and a Empire Strikes Back moment and a Return of the Jedi, because it basically went to 3 different eras. You had the Clone Wars era for episode 1. Then episode 2 is kind of like the original trilogy-ish era, like in between 3 and 4 at least. And then, of course, we go post episode 6 for episode 3. So I thought that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed a little, I guess, I don't want to say it was disjointed, but I don't like, did you feel like we needed the Morgan Elsbeth story? Let me just start there.
Okay, hold on. Well, before we do that, because that's getting into something here.
Okay.
Ronaldo's, I just want to get this out of the way first. Ronaldo says, by the way, happy Mother's Day for all your moms. Thanks, man. Yeah, that's part of the reason, actually, why we had to bump it back up today, honestly, was because,
right.
there's just all kinds of crazy things, work, and I got family stuff going on, so it's kind of tough. But you do bring up a good point, though. And honestly, when they first announced this thing, and they told us basically what it was going to be finally, because first of all, we always knew it as Tales of the Jedi Season 2, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't know that it was going to be called Tales of the Empire until like a month ago. Like, it was pretty close to, ramping up. And I think we got that trailer that dropped, it was like a month ago or something. I remember. And then once that happened, that's okay. And then we knew it was Tales of the Empire. Then we saw how the whole thing broke down. And I remember when I first saw it, I was like, Morgan Elsbeth, huh? But you know what? If you think about it, it makes sense. Because she is a key character in the post-Return of the Jedi TV Mandoverse, if you really think about it. Especially when it comes to Ahsoka. Granted, I know she's still a little minor. Notice I said central. I didn't say major character. I said central character. So,
okay.
I mean, do we need it? No. But then, you can make the argument, like, what do we really need? at this point. I mean, that would be a good thing to throw on you too. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts, of course, on the Morgan Elsbeth part, and if we needed it, since you posted the discussion.
That,
But
that
who do we need at this point?
See, I think what would have been more um, engaging or more interesting would if we would have done Thrawn.
Yeah, you mean, but I don't know. He's sort of getting.
I mean, granted, we've seen a lot of him lately within
Well,
Rebels, and
it's not
now with
just
the
that. You got to look at also the books and the comics have done his origin story to death. I mean, granted, I guess you could have done an abbreviated version, but I think that people know, Morgan Elsbeth is a character that has been prominently featured, but we don't really know a whole lot of background on.
But I think with Morgan though, it's kind of like I don't know if she's like you said, she's a central part of I guess the Ahsoka series, if you want to call it that. But like, for example, we first come to know Morgan in what the episode of the Mandalorian.
Yeah, where
It's the first time
Ahsoka was introduced.
Yeah, and Ahsoka was introduced. Okay, she's looking for Thrawn.
Season
They have their
2. What's it, season? Yeah, I think it was season 2,
yeah, season
episode
2.
5.
So then, like, okay, they have their battle. She's looking for Thrawn. She has this whole Mandalorian like spear pike type thing weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then after that, we don't see her again until the Ahsoka series, and then when we get her in the first season of the Ahsoka series, she's vanquished. So it's kind of like,
yeah, I know.
You see what I'm saying? Like
I know.
It's not like she's really that relevant to me because
well,
she's
and that's why I said what I said. That's why I said that she's a central character, but not necessarily a major one.
Right, and I can understand your point on that.
But here's the thing, though. I think that where it's coming in is like through Morgan's story, you could tell the story of the Night Sisters because the Night Sisters were born out of the EU's Dathomir witches, which are, they're kind of interchangeable even in new canon. But I think that what they were doing was they were using Morgan as instead of the what was it? The mother.
Mother Towson.
Yeah.
Mother
So she was sort of central in, the Clone Wars and I think even a little bit in Rebels too. But I think more importantly, what they were trying to do for this was here's a character that we've recently introduced. And it could do two things. One, it can expand the character a little bit, give her a little bit more meat, make the scenes that she did appear in both The Mandalorian and Ahsoka have a little bit more meaning, because it's essentially telling how did she get hooked up with Thrawn. So there's that. And then, the other thing that I think it does too is it sort of gives you an insight. Like it takes a character and says, okay, you're going to get to know the Night Sisters through this person. I mean, I think that that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I just felt like her story is a bit disjointed because
it is.
So like they have her as the brain behind the whole TIE Defenders program. It's kind of like, okay, where did that come from?
Yeah, I thought that was a little.
You see what I'm saying?
That was just a little strange too. Yeah, they're almost trying to come up with. This is the danger, I think, of, and they started to do this, honestly. I mean, as much praise as we've had for the Bad Batch Season 3, they were running because it's like, oh, geez. It's yet another group that's working on another covert thing that will somehow tie back to the Death Star in a way. I mean, granted, they really just moved the funding from Necromancer to Stardust, but still, they keep adding on to all the people that are responsible, because if you think about it, initially we thought the Geonosians were the one. If you watch Attack of the Clones, you are led to believe that the Geonosians came up with it, and you're like, oh, well, they're probably the ones that built it, even though that doesn't really jibe too much with the EU. Actually, the current canon story jibes a lot more with the EU. And it does make sense that, people would be working on different pieces, and that's what I liked about the Catalyst novel and then Rogue One, is it delved into the creation of the Death Star quite a bit. But again, they they didn't actually do it, but they started to run into that risk of you're just going to keep adding more lore to this thing, and just to give that character some validity. Because, like you said, right? I mean, they had to give her something to do for that second episode. Because the first episode, I mean, I thought it was cool, her homeland's being like invaded. She ends up fighting Grievous, and Grievous, by the way, is a lot more menacing in
Yeah.
the animation, in
Oh
this
yeah.
especially, than than we get in, say, Revenge of the Sith. But that aside, that part makes sense. The last part makes sense because it somewhat juxtaposes with when we see her in The Mandalorian. But you're right, I did feel that episode 2, although the whole Thrawn introduction, and it was nice to see Thrawn being Thrawn again, and I thought their interaction was cool. From a story perspective, it's like, why are we here? What are we doing?
Exactly. And that's why I ultimately asked a initial question, like, was she necessary? Is
Well,
this a necessary story for
right.
us?
Now, of course, Ronaldo says this is not a story we needed to see, but it was fun. And then, of course, David was just saying hello. I'm sure he'll weigh in on this pretty soon. And then Ronaldo comes in with this is the best Grievous I've seen in any medium. He's terrifying, and I agree. I mean, that was the one thing that I thought, like, man, if he was depicted like this in Revenge of the Sith, you would have a way cooler villain, because he had potential, and you and I had talked about that I think even when we did our What is Star Wars re-reviews of this stuff. We're like, man, a lot of these stories, a lot of these characters have so much more potential than what we got on screen, and unfortunately that was left to the novel writers and the comic illustrators to fulfill that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I like seeing the getting, like we said, I guess more of a true depiction of Grievous. I mean, especially with a name like that, like General Grievous. I mean, first of all,
Right.
that just sounds, but then he's kind of like, I mean, they in Attack of the not Attack of the Clone, Revenge of the Sith, he was kind of like almost like this cowardly daughter kind of general, where he was always running and trying to. He really didn't seem all that menacing, except for that one time he went against Obi-Wan at the one time. He was walking someone like that was creepy.
Yeah, that
But he
was
was actually
creepy.
kind of creepy. He was menacing in the Clone Wars animation. Like there were some like
Yep.
episodes where he was wiping through like a lot of the Jedi and taking their lightsabers. Or there was one situation where um it's like Anakin and Obi-Wan and I think Ahsoka, they were trying to break into his like fortress on this one planet. And like, okay, like you really kind of got to more or less to see Grievous kind of be that guy. And he was like, ultimate, villain. However, in this, it was kind of how we felt when we saw I will almost juxtapose this to how we felt about Vader and Obi-Wan, how we saw how menacing Vader was in the Obi-Wan series. Like when he went through that town, he just started wiping out like towns. He was dragging them with the force. He's snapping people's necks. I mean,
Oh,
you're just like,
it was a thing of beauty.
man, it was Thing of Beauty. Or the Rogue One scene, like when he went down that hole, like that's the Vader like we
Yeah.
wanted to see. And we got that with Grievous, excuse me, in this particular episode. Well, one of the episodes of Tales of
Yeah,
the Empire.
primarily the first one, but I mean, the
Yeah,
point stands though is that it's just a shame that we're getting this in animation. Now,
right.
I mean, okay, Vader has a little bit of advantage because he was in pretty much everything. I mean, he was pretty well represented, right? And then
Hmm.
you have a couple other characters because again, we hated Boba Fett's depiction in the Book of Boba Fett, but he was
Yeah,
awesome in The Mandalorian though. And then of course in the
right.
films. But I count more The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett because that's where you're really getting into the meat of his story a little bit. But obviously, these are live action depictions of these characters, and it would have been nice to have seen something live action with Grievous to where he could have acted like this. Because I always thought that he had potential. He was a very menacing looking character. I could see where Lucas was going from the standpoint of, giving him the cough and all that stuff. It's like, okay, let's not do another, perfect killing droid or something, right? Let's give him a weakness, kind of like how Vader had a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you said. I mean, it's funny how he was depicted in Revenge of the Sith, because on one hand, he was pretty cunning, and I like the fact that if the odds started stacking against him, he would just bail. I mean, that was a cool little plot point. But I think the biggest problem is, like you said, there's a little bit of a bumbling type nature going, which sort of drove me nuts. Now, Ronaldo brings up a good point, too. He says the original Grievous from the first Clone Wars show was a monster. And that's true. In fact, unfortunately, that was the... I keep wanting to say... It was that Japanese anime guy that created those like little 7-minute Clone Wars shorts. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Those, because I remember that was the one when they showed Dooku training Grievous with the lightsaber.
Right.
Yeah, I
Now,
remember that one. Yeah, that was cool.
the problem with that is those came out right before Episode 3, and the big issue, of course, was we're looking at that Grievous thinking that's what we're going to get on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we wouldn't have necessarily had as much of a problem with him if it hadn't been like we were set up, first of all, with that first Clone Wars little animated shorts, and then also afterwards, after seeing them, you're just like, man, I mean, it wasn't awful, but there was some missed opportunities there.
Well, I kind of feel the same way about when we got Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett. Like, it was really good to see him, but it's like they killed him off too quick. Like, we didn't get a chance to really experience Cad Bane the way we wanted to either.
Yeah, I don't understand this obsession they have, and it's usually in live action that this happens, where they have a really cool character, they bring him in, and then they kill him off.
Yeah.
It's like, what's up with that? Cad Bane was this guy that everybody's looking forward to, and I get it. You don't want to do the fan service thing of, well, we'll just keep these people alive because they're cool and we could sell action figures. They're actually trying to think a little bit of story. I don't know. I agree, though. I think that sometimes they go a little bit too far the other way. Ted Adam Green's back with us. He says, Grievous is definitely much better in the animation than the live action. Far more similar to Vader, in my opinion. And that's kind of what I think that they were going for, is they were going for a very Vader-esque villain. Because if you think about it, they've had... I always forget the guy in New Dawn, it begins with a V. But he was cool, and he kind of had a little bit of that too. Of course, we see a little bit of, if Vader was basically unhinged and kind of emo, he'd be Kylo Ren. Vader is definitely the template for all Star Wars villains.
Sure.
At least, like that type.
Yeah.
Anybody that they want to make a main bad guy. They don't even necessarily have to be Sith or Force using. They could just be like the criminal guy in a New Dawn. I wish I could remember that guy's name. I never can remember his name. And he's actually one of my favorite depictions of a villain. And he had a cool name too, actually. I should look that up. I'll look that up while we're talking about it. But I agree that you are right in the sense of there's a lot of lost opportunities on a lot of things, I think, in this little story arc that we got. But
yeah, go ahead.
But it comes down to, though, and again, obviously, there's a lot more to get into with this. But now I'm curious, because I alluded to this earlier. What do you think they should have, like, who should have they have focused on then?
By the way, is the person you talking about Vidian?
Yes, Vidian. I knew it began with a V, and I knew it had a cool name.
Yeah, Count Vidian. Yes.
Count Vidian, yeah. Just he's really, really good, really threatening, menacing. I was just kind of reading the book, going, man, I'd like to see this guy in live action. That would be really, really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna talk about Tales of the Empire, I mean, I would have loved to see something like Paleon, or I
And
could
he was
see.
there at least. At least they
I mean,
put
he
him
was
in
there.
there.
Yeah, they put him in there. Yeah, but I mean, like, if you want to do like a backstory, like how he got with Thrawn, and that whole allegiance type thing, um, I think honestly, like I will. This is maybe a little bit out there, but I would love to see like the royal guards, like actually show them like how they're training and how to become a royal guard to Palpatine. Like if they show like a thing where Palpatine was like, okay, testing them to see if they're worthy of protecting him. I think that would have been cool. Stories, I think characters or things that of people that we have seen that we don't get a whole lot of backstory on, that you can create a whole backdrop on. I think those type of characters would be cool, especially from the Imperial side, because we don't see a whole lot. So um they could even, I mean, even though Tarkin has his own book, but like if you did Tarkin, that would be cool. Just see his ascension into um or him facing like Vader. Because I remember there was like a test of his that he had to kind of deal with, where he had to go up against Vader. Just things like that. Like I think those would be more compelling than like Morgan Elsbeth. Like, who cares?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things, because again, I mean, it's an argument either way, right? And this is where I think that Disney is just dropping the ball constantly, and that is that on one hand, their marketing department might argue like a royal guard, who cares about that? But we're going, yeah, but you know, you're taking some character that nobody really cares about, because like you said, if you actually had a person and followed their trajectory, their whole story arc from, like you could even divide it the same way. Episode 1 is the person that is trying to be a royal guard, and then episode 2 is kind of what they're going through when they are, and like you said, some of the Palpatine training and all that stuff. And then 3, after the fall of the Empire, what happens to them. I mean, you could almost keep that.
Yeah, but and especially with the Royal Guard, I mean, one, they've always been like a cool addition. They've always been menacing. I mean, I think that, and
Hmm.
they kind of tried to reduplicate that. They tried to duplicate that with
The Praetorian
the,
Guard.
the Praetorian guards with Snoke. But you got to think about it. It's like, okay, if you're protecting the Emperor, right? And mind you, he's still, even as the Emperor, like people still didn't, like in an original trilogy, people still didn't know he was a Sith Lord.
Yeah, he had to. That was something that you and I actually were talking about primarily when we were doing. I think it was when we were talking about Palpatine's true power and it was really a strategy or whatever, and we brought up the whole Zillo Beast thing, because you have to feel for the guy in a way. On one hand, he has a threat. He has to watch all these guys like trying to help him, and he's sitting there going, I could take care of this in like 30 seconds."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you guys are supposed to be protecting me. I can literally take all of you out,
Hmm.
right? Like, I mean, you're not even that good at protecting me, really. And it's gotta be just so frustrating, and he has to show such restraint in order to let these guys protect him when he
Right.
could easily do it, right? And so I think where the Royal Guard comes in is, it's like sneak attacks, larger numbers, because as powerful as Palpatine is, he could be overwhelmed. Granted, it takes a lot, but it could happen.
Yeah, and that's what you take somebody like, okay, Vader's his enforcer, but like arguably, like next to him, Vader is the most powerful person, running around in the galaxy that
Hmm.
most people would know. But you have to think about it. It's like, all right, well, the Royal Guards, like if you're protecting Palpatine, you kind of almost have to have some force ability. and we've never seen, and they've always been so mysterious. It's almost kind of like they're like almost glorified inquisitors, like they're even more powerful than inquisitors. And you almost have to wonder, like, okay, well, what can they do? Because, and that's the mystery of them. It's like they're very stoic. They don't talk. But they do carry like a gravitas, a presence, like especially when they're walking with Palpatine. And it's even juxtaposed with like Palpatine and Vader in all black, and then you got these two big giant guys in red. It's just like, okay, who are these guys and what do they do? And it's like, how do you earn the right to get that close? That's what I'm saying. You got that close to the Emperor, where you're around him all the time. You know who he is. You know what he does. There's a certain level of trust and mystery, and there's a lot that kind of goes into that. And I think that will be more compelling for me, because like I said, we don't see a whole lot of Sith training. We don't see a whole lot of, we hear, okay, use your anger, use your hate. Magically, I'm a Sith Lord now. But it's like, okay, but there has to be more to it than that. So, and I think that will be the more compelling story. But Morgan Elsbeth, I mean, she got her butt kicked by Ahsoka. Okay, so you're not really that formidable a fighter. And that's no slouch on Ahsoka. I mean,
Yeah, I was
Ahsoka
gonna say, and I mean, because I
Ahsoka's
think,
pretty powerful. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, you really don't hold a foot candle to her. So, which also kind of made me like, because she was battling Sabine, so that's more believable because Sabine is a novice.
Mhm.
So okay, in Ahsoka, yeah, I can see why Morgan. But then again, Morgan didn't she go up against? Yeah, Morgan went up against Ahsoka again, and that was one of our bigger complaints. Like, you should have kicked the crap out of her.
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, it's also like how it was easier to see where some of these people ranked earlier on. Because
Mhm.
I'll tell you what the problem that I have with a lot of this stuff is. First of all, I think the other reason why they chose the Morgan Elsbeth storyline for these first 3 episodes was to give her a little bit of, hey, she's a really great fighter type of a thing. She could take on all these multiple enemies at once. Eva goes up against Grievous, basically. I mean, that she's no slouch in the combat
Combat.
department.
Mhm.
But so I think that was the purpose for that. But even beyond that, it would be good to do a Royal Guard too, because ever since they started expanding the lore with the sequel trilogy, you have this whole situation now where it used to be that the Royal Guards would be the ones with like the energy baton type, sticks or whatever, staffs.
Mhm.
Vibroblades was
Mhm.
actually one of the main things that they would use. But then what happened was you started to have more people with them, like
Mhm.
Inquisitors. In The Force Awakens, you even had a stormtrooper with one. You
Mhm.
had, like some of the droids and stuff in Revenge of the Sith that had them. So now you're expanding out all these different people, and now it's getting a little convoluted. You're like, well, okay, well, wait, where do these guys actually fall? I mean, you know that they are probably the best, but you don't have necessarily a clean ranking anymore with these guys. And that's why I think what you're proposing would have been a better choice, because number one, it's something we all know. Everybody knows, at least I can't say everybody because the casual fan probably
Right.
doesn't, but the casual fan has at least seen them. Yeah, they probably don't know that they're the Royal Guards per se.
Yeah, their title or something like, but they've
Right.
seen them with Palpatine before.
Yeah, if you just said, hey, those big, tall, red dudes that are next to Palpatine all the time? Yeah,
Like,
those
who are that?
guys.
Yeah.
So you basically have that, and you basically get those guys, you follow somebody from the inception, like them trying to be or whatever, and you follow their journey into being a Royal Guard, and then demonstrate what that means. Why are they more powerful than Inquisitors?
Mhm.
I mean, were Royal Guards just Inquisitors in red robes and a helmet? I mean, we
Mhm.
don't know. And now what's happened is you've taken something that Lucas created that was nice and vague enough to where you understood, You didn't really have to question it too much. Well, now that you're adding all this lore in, well, now you have to explain it. And that's the biggest issue that I have when they keep trying to make it more sci-fi than fantasy.
Or I would do the Grand Inquisitor. That would be a cool story.
Oh, that would be a cool story too, yeah.
Like
And
as far
that
as
would,
other people, I think that would be an awesome one.
sure. All right, Ronaldo says, I think she's one of the few characters that could start evil and end evil with no redemption, which is something we usually don't see. Well, it's something that we usually don't see with the, like the main force using bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of,
I mean, like you said, you had Callus who did defect.
Well, yes, for some of these Imperial troops, that's true. You did have those. You had Hux.
Yep. Technically, you had Finn.
Technically, you had Finn. There were a handful of them, and that is true, but usually it's the bigger force user, come back to the light side thing. Because for every one that you can name like 20 of them that didn't. So I don't know if that's necessarily...
Dooku never got a chance to come back.
No. Dooku never got a chance to come back, and I'm not so sure... Well, he might have been thinking about it when his head was between those two lightsabers and Palpatine was screaming, "Do it."
Yeah.
I'm sure he probably had a few thoughts going like, maybe I'm on the wrong side of history here. But other than that, though, it was the ideal, because remember, that was what Dooku's thing was. It was more the fact that he did feel the Jedi were corrupt, and that they were corrupting the Republic, and the Republic was becoming too bureaucratic or whatever, and that's what the whole separatist vibe was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because in each case, I mean, this is usually what happens anyway, two opposing sides, both of them think they're the good guy. But what makes this really interesting is the fact that it really becomes almost like a false flag kind of thing, because Palpatine was actually making some of the more benign, innocuous things that the Republic was doing seem evil to the Separatists in order to reinforce what they thought, and vice versa. So really, if those guys could all just gotten in a room together, they probably would have realized, like, oh, we're being duped here, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that never happened. So that's why I thought it was really interesting that you started seeing a separatist presence in things like Andor. And, what was the show that just... Oh, yeah, The Bad Batch. Bad Batch had a couple of separatists sprinkled in there. And it was nice to see that happening. That we're finding out, well, what happened to this entire group of people after this? And that could have been another thing they could have done. Maybe you see... Maybe you have a couple of separatists joining the Empire, but they're a little torn because it was the Republic. It's... I mean, there's all kinds of different things they could have done. So I agree that maybe the Morgan Elsbeth story wasn't the greatest subject matter. Oh, by the way, Dragonfly joins us. What's up, Dragonfly?
Hey.
It's good to see you. I mean, it just, I don't know. I agree that I like the way that the show was done. I liked how they divided it into the 3 different eras.
Yeah.
Following her journey through each one. And continuing it, too. Because in the 3rd episode, obviously, she's revisiting. It's almost like, okay, you're still the magistrate. And people are sort of used to the way she's been ruling. But now the New Republic comes up and it's like, hey, you got to stand down here. War's over. Things are changing. And we want you to be a part of that. And it actually reminded me of that one Bad Batch storyline that they had with those kids, where they were trying to get away from that slave master dude.
Oh, yeah.
And they ended up following, they ended up joining the Bad Batch's crew. It very much had vibes of that. It had there's a couple other examples of that, too. But I thought that it was a really fascinating looking at something that was happening during the Empire, because you're focused on this one planet and this one village. It's like, okay, here's how it looks and how it acts during the reign of the Empire. The Empire has fallen. And in a lot of cases, post episode 6, we're always focused on what the remnants are doing and a lot of these key characters. But it's interesting when they go back to these same locations. It's like, well, now, how does this location look after the Empire has fallen? And do these people even know it's happened? That's the other thing you got to look at.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I kind of agree with, I think it was Ronaldo who said it was like, okay, it wasn't necessary, but it was fun. But like I said, I just feel like there was, like you said at the top of the show, Eric, I think they were just trying to make everything have a connection, and it just didn't seem authentic for her to be the brains behind the TIE Defender program. Like, now all of a sudden she's like this weapons expert, but like, you were a Dathomir witch. It's like, so, like, it just, and then like a lot of significant things that might have happened, like, didn't happen on screen, so we didn't get a chance. So, you know what I mean? It's just, mm, I just think they could have picked a better character, in my opinion. But I mean, I guess it was cool, but just didn't
Yeah,
do it for me.
I don't know if that's going to necessarily resonate with a lot of fans. I think that, again, it's sort of like what I said at the beginning of the show. I think what they were trying to do is, look, let's take a character that's current, that's new, that has been central somewhat to the plot line, and fabricate an origin story that can also tie in a lot of other things. Because I think that they're not necessarily doing this by accident. I think that this is very much by design, something you very rarely hear me accuse Lucasfilm of doing. But I do think that they are doing this by design. I think that what's happening is they're trying to set up, in some cases, things that they might want to bring up in perhaps an Ahsoka Season 2 or a Mandalorian Season 4, maybe the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which, by the way, I heard Sigourney Weaver is in talks now to join that. So that's...
Alien.
I know. It's like Ripley.
Yep.
Ripley in the Star Wars universe,
Exactly.
That'd be kind of interesting. Alien versus Predator versus Wampa. I don't know. But basically, I think that what we're looking at overall is they're using this to set up other stories that they either want to solidify or perhaps, I don't know, maybe they just want to tighten up. Like I said, they want to explain, hey, this is how come this character can do X, Y, and Z. Just in case. We got a late birthday wish, of course, from David for you. Stay late. It's all right. Happy birthday, Daryl. I'm glad you were born. May the force be with you always.
Thank you, sir. Very much appreciate it.
He says he got you a gift. It's a force cane. Trying to, doing the whole Yoda thing, right?
Hey, man, as long as I have his wisdom and his power, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, well, that's, Unfortunately, it'll probably be you'll have more of his hip problems and his mobility issues. Oh, you'll get the wisdom. You just won't be able to move very much to, be able to do anything about it.
Right. Well, at least. No, I don't want to live till I'm almost 900 years old. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even imagine that. Plus, I think Social Security is going to run out before then. I'm quite certain my pensions aren't going to last that long.
Right.
Or it's like, all right, look, man, we got to talk here because,
now they got to send people to kill me just because I'm costing them too much.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that would actually be a good plot to a movie, though. So the General Grievous 19 rejoins us again.
Ah.
It's like, hello there. Which, of course, which is actually Grievous's killer's line, I think. So, of course, now everybody's got to latch on, right?
No.
So now, Ronaldo,
Yes,
what's your birthday? Happy birthday, Jedi Master. Oh, nice. He'll buy you a house in Dagobah.
So Florida, cool.
Yeah, or Louisiana probably. Or Alabama, perhaps. I hear property's actually pretty cheap in Dagobah.
Well, yeah, it's, it's like a do-it-yourself project out there.
I don't know. I think I would actually rather have a place there than maybe Exegol. Too many storms.
I don't know. Good sleeping weather, but then so is Dagobah. But I don't know what the heck is in Dagobah. So
That's the problem. And think about it. It's like a whole planet full of whatever's
swampland.
there. I mean,
Yeah,
when
it's
I
like
was,
snakes and everything crawling all over the place. I mean, it's like being sleeping in the Everglades.
it'd be like in Amazon, but the whole planet's like that.
All right, it's like Naked and Afraid.
Yes, pretty much how, if you think about it, that's what I would have been Yoda. That ship, his little pod lands or whatever,
Yep.
opens up. He's looking around like,
Yeah.
General Grievous basically said that his namesake was great in Tales of the Empire. And yeah, we were talking about that earlier, actually, that for once, you had an enemy that was menacing.
Yeah, formidable and menacing. Absolutely.
Formidable and menacing. I mean, he was actually, I would even go as far as to say, terrifying in this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I think, hey, that's another thing they could have done too. They could have focused on him for the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, because where the heck did he even come from?
Exactly. They never
See,
really... They did have... they had a little bit of an explanation, right? Like some of the encyclopedias talked about it. It was alluded to in a few novels. But you're right. They haven't had like a full-blown, here, let's characterize this character's story arc, right? Let's get the origin thing going and talk about maybe how he transitioned from... So I think he was like... He might have been like a former Jedi, or he might have been a dark side or something. He was something, or he was like
I just thought he was just a regular general, but he was a great...
He might have been, and then what they did was like his heart and his brain survived or whatever, and
it was like something happened that kind of RoboCopped him, basically.
Yeah, essentially, that's basically what he is.
Like
He's a Star Wars version of RoboCop, pretty much. that's pretty much what they did. I like that. They RoboCopped him. And then, of course, Dooku, of course, trained him and, taught him the Jedi arts, as it were, at least in combat. So, yeah, he was Grievous. Can't say enough of him. He's probably in these first 3 episodes. Because, again, if you guys are just, you're just tuning in or whatever, or maybe you didn't hear us say it when we talked about it in the last show. Obviously, tonight, because of the way that they divided the series, the first 3 episodes were dealing with Morgan Elsbeth, and then the second 3 will deal with Boris Offee. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they actually characterize Boris Offee in the second, or Barriss Offee rather, Barriss Offee in the second half, because she does have somewhat of an expanded story, even in the new canon books. So I want to see how they bring that to life, which, of course, is what you were saying, that they could have done here, is they could have just taken, say, Thrawn's arc that they had in the novels, and they did a condensed version in the comics. Well, fine, do a condensed version with 3 episodes here. David says, Mr. Vance, how would you rate the animation? I mean, pretty much it follows the animation. It's interesting that you bring up the animation because it's different from, say, your Bad Batch and all that other stuff. Because if you guys remember when they released Tales of the Jedi, it was a different style of animation. It wasn't that same. I mean, it was still 3D animation technically, but it was different than what they were doing. They wanted to change it up.
It feels like a little bit of the normal 3D animation that we get, but then it kind of has a bit of a Visions.
I was just about to say that. Just about to say that. It's basically if you combine the 3D animation that they usually use with the Visions animation, at least from certain studios, because even within Visions it differs quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
But like you could tell like there's some episodes in Visions where the animation style is a little bit closer to what we're used to with Star Wars animation. So I think that absolutely they nailed it. And I like the fact that they did that because it keeps things from being too derivative.
Yeah.
And it definitely gives you a different vibe for the show. Because if you really stop and think about it, even though some of this is because of just natural advances in technology, but then there's other elements of it where they're trying to put unique spins, I think would be the best way to put it, on each of these shows. So they're not all too derivative. Ronaldo says animation is a 10 out of 10 for me. Really solid. Yeah, it really is. I mean, you can't really say enough good things about it. Generally speaking, unless they get a little bit too experimental in visions, but again, that's because of that's just the individual animation studios. But generally, the animation is usually good.
Yeah.
I think.
And once again, all these stories are once again directed by Filoni, which also kind of makes me wonder, like, because we just wrapped up the Bad Batch, and so you kind of wonder, is he getting kind of burned out a little bit? Because he's got the Bad Batch. He had um what's the show we just wrapped up? But he's doing a Mandalorian. He's got um Tales of the Empire or the Tales series, essentially. So he's got his hands in a lot of different things, which we expect him to. But being the kind of the creative director over it all, you can almost kind of wonder, like, um has that affected him in some way? As far as like with the Morgan Elsbeth story, like why it may not have been as good as it could have, if and like I said, I can't even say if it could have been, because like I said, I really don't think we needed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So
it is as good as it could have been.
yeah, I
actually.
mean, yeah, it's probably, yeah.
I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, you could have taken out, like you said, her basically bringing in the TIE Defender thing was a little bit of a stretch, but there are some things that they could have done that I think maybe what you're saying is if he was a little bit fresher and not quite as burnt doing so many different things, because he's being torn in so many different directions.
Yeah.
Not just as showrunner and writer for a number of these different things, including director in some cases, but then he's also the creative director. He has to oversee a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, even the stuff that he's not physically
Involved
a
in
part of.
necessarily, yeah.
Exactly. But he's kind of had to work with the story groups and all that type of stuff. So
Right, so
yeah.
I mean, it does stand to reason. I would agree wholeheartedly that, if you have a situation where you're being spread so thin, even if you love what you're doing,
Yeah.
it's just all this stuff that you're trying to keep track of. Yeah, I think some
Yeah.
could actually give. Some things might slip through the proverbial cracks, but I don't know if that was the case in this, though, because I think a lot of it would depend on when was this written.
Yeah, that's a valid point. What would you rate this though? What would you rate these first?
Well, it
three?
is getting to that point. Now, we know Ronaldo's rating the animation a 10 out of 10.
All right.
If I'm going
I
to
would agree
guess,
with him on that.
you're going to give it a what?
I said I would agree with Ronaldo. Like the animation was, solid.
Okay, because I know you're not giving the show, like,
Oh,
these first 3
absolutely.
episodes a 10 out of 10.
Absolutely not.
Ronaldo will probably give it a 9.7, though.
Right. 9.73.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to go to the second decimal place now. Well,
I would probably give the actual show itself, like the episodes, 4.5.
that low, huh?
Yeah, I just really
That's
did.
that's a David rating right there.
Hey, I was talking to him a lot today, so it's
It's
probably rubbed off on me.
it's your version of Andor.
Yeah, I know.
You've actually rated Visions
higher. I know. But that's according to Visions. Remember, we always had that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a Visions
Yeah,
for like,
right. Like a Vision 7 is like a Star Wars 3 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to do it's like a conversion rate.
I don't know. I'd probably give it a 5.
Okay.
Kind of like a right down the middle. It's not, because another thing that I like to use in my rating systems is if somebody Never saw anything Star Wars related. Of course, you do have to go into the whole, yeah, but they should really be starting with episode 4 and all that. Aside from that, I'm just talking about whenever you're looking at a particular episode of anything, whether it's a live action series, animation, movie, doesn't matter. Would you actually show this particular episode or film or whatever to somebody and say, yes, this is what Star Wars is about? And usually, if it's in the higher realms of that, of course, the higher it goes, the more that I would and say, yeah, this is what it is, and I would feel comfortable doing that. With this, I mean, it just, it was kind of, I didn't think it was bad, really, but I didn't think it was great either, mostly from a story perspective. I mean, again, the pacing was good, like, everything about it was good.
Mm-hmm.
It just, the story didn't really land very well. And so now, when it comes time for Barasafi's story arc, that I think is going to be a lot more interesting because that's going to continue from the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And that was already begun in season 5 of the Clone Wars. And now we're going to basically see the results of pretty much what happened after the events of season 5. Exactly. David says, is there a certain style of animation that makes it Star Wars? There's something uniquely Star Wars about the animation.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say that they have established the 3D animation that's the standard for most of these things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be because Star Wars isn't... Remember, Star Wars wasn't birthed in animation. It was birthed in film.
Yeah, I get this question because it's like... Because it was birthed in film, Star Wars has its own particular standards and rules, and so did they create something like that for animation? And I think that's kind of and to your point, I agree, Eric, that the 3D animation, I think they do that really well. Even though if you look all throughout the animation, the Bad Batch, Rebels, Clone Wars, all has the same uniformity of look. The only one I can say that was different is Resistance. Resistance kind of had
that was almost like a complete 2D animation and very cartoonish.
Very cartoonish, but it kind of had a very like Saturday morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, totally. I know.
Like, I'm trying to think of like a good, like Calliu or like Paw Patrol or something stupid. Like, like it has a weird, different type of.
It does. And I think, and again, it's because it's going for a different age group. It's going for a lot of different things. So, I mean, there's a Star Wars part in it. And then I think what's become Star Wars style animation is that 3D animation to where it's indistinguishable from being a movie. I mean, a lot of times, honestly, I forget I'm watching an animated show when I watch it.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a sign of not only good animation, but it makes you feel like you're immersed in a film. It doesn't feel like you're watching a cartoon. That's why a lot of Star Wars fans really hate it.
Yeah, when
it's like
cartoon.
It's like any animation fan, because animation is a little bit more higher brow. It's more serious. It's sort of like the difference between a comic and a graphic novel. It's that kind of thing.
I would almost liken the Star Wars animation to be an upgrade, and you might go with me on this, Eric. Almost an upgrade of Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
Like a little bit more depth.
I mean,
like that same kind of look and vibe.
It's still kind of 2D animation, but yeah.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the upgrade. It's the
it is. If that show were made today, that's the animation style they would use, hands down. And actually, they sort of have, because even when they came out with, which actually was really, really good. It's too bad that Adam West died.
Man, I was just thinking about those two, man. Those were awesome.
Those were two, I mean, they were really good, where they had Adam West, Burt Ward. They had a lot of any of the original characters from the 60s show that are left, that are still alive. They had them voiced. I think Julie Newmar was a Catwoman. I mean, they really did a good job with it, and it was good. I mean, the stories were good. It was
Stories
done well.
is actually better than the actual live action
Yeah.
show for
Oh,
them toys.
absolutely. You know,
So,
it still had a little bit of the campy sense of humor, but it was toned down quite a bit.
yeah.
And it was a little bit more serious, but it had that same like look that Batman had and just the whole universe. It had that same look in animation. So I think that if Batman the Animated Series that we all know and love from the 90s, if that were made today, it absolutely would be done in that style of animation. Let's see. Ronaldo gives it an 8.5. Ooh, kind of like an even. We're sticking with non-traditional numbers. Of course, Grievous says animation and Tales of the Empire was great. I love how
The Clone Wars
thank you. I just got something stuck in my throat here. Animation style evolved since 2008 to the top tier animation quality now, and that's again, I think a lot of it isn't even so much of a conscious animation style. It's really more this is the animation style they're going for, and they're just getting better at it.
Yeah.
And technology is growing.
Yeah, they're just refining it more.
They're refining it, yeah. So, I mean, if there's any differences, I think it really has more to do with that than it does them consciously trying to do things. Except Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire is a slightly different variation. Obviously, Visions is completely different. As you pointed out, Resistance is completely different. So those are basically conscious efforts. But other than that, yeah. So Ronaldo's at 8.5. You're at like 4.
4.5.
4.5. I gave it a half above you at 5.
Yep.
So hopefully, and again, this is a really unique situation for us because it really doesn't have to do with the actual show. Like, even though we've only watched the first 3 episodes, I'm not saying that Tales of the Empire is a bad show. It was just the wrong story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an important distinction that you have to make. And that's really more so what these ratings are reflecting, not so much the show. So I'm really curious, next week when we do
Barasafi.
Yeah, the Barasafi one, 4 through 6. It's gonna be really interesting. Let's see, the General Grievous 19's got one popping in. He says, I would compare the Clone Wars animation to the animation in the Arcane series. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And it's really interesting because if you start to get super deep in the animation world and you start not just going by animation studios, but the actual animators themselves and follow their different projects, you can begin to see their stamp, their style, things that they bring to each project. And now the animation styles are somewhat endless. You can do all kinds of different things. I mean, look no further than the anime world with all these different studios. Even if we're keeping it with Star Wars, look at Visions.
Visions, yeah.
It's all different. All right, so not really sure what we're doing tomorrow yet. It'll be something, though. We got a lot of topics floating around. I can tell you guys
Definitely.
that.
Yeah.
We got a lot of topics. Actually, let me see, because I think was that the same poll? I'm starting to lose track of all these polls that I keep putting up. Let me look at the last poll here. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So here's what we're going to have to do. So it looks like what we're talking about tomorrow is the 10 unanswered questions for the Bad Batch after seeing season 3. That one took 66% of the votes. There's a decent amount of voters, like 47 votes. So a lot of people participated. 23% was looking for the Acolyte trailer reaction review. The second one. 6%, 5 things we need in the Mando Grogu film. And then, of course, 4%, 10 reasons Rey is not a Mary Sue. Now, of course, we're going to eventually cover probably a large majority, or if not all of them. Some of them we'll actually do for our live shows. Some of them we'll probably do pre-records for if we can't do it or whatever. We could just plug an episode in that wouldn't be live. It would be pre-recorded. Other ones we can also add to the single episode we have for our members, for people like David who actually, basically donate monthly, and he's a Jedi Master. So if you guys are curious about those packages, they're on buymeacoffee.com. Of course, you could just give us, it's like tips, or they call them, coffees or whatever, a couple bucks or whatever. But we do have some stuff for that, and we got to make more content for our members only page as well. So yeah, it looks like Monday is going to be 10 unanswered questions that we still have for the Bad Batch. Uh-oh. David's got a topic. Actually, I think one of the things that, besides bringing him on one day, I think he does. I had to look at those again. I think he does get to choose one. So, which is worse, Fast and Furious or Visions? Ooh, but you got to give us a number, though. So, in order to really do that correctly, you would have to specify which film versus which season of Visions. In fact, because Visions is a season, I would even go like, which 3 Fast and Furious movies are worse than which season of Visions? That could actually be a fun one, honestly. The more that I think about it, the more I'm kind of like, that might actually not be a terrible thing to do. But we'll see. But tomorrow, 10 unanswered questions we have after seeing the series finale, The Bad Batch. We'll cover that. And then next week, we're going to end up, of course, continuing on 4 through 6. And then to wrap us up, David's like, you all hate them both. Does it matter? That's not true.
No, that's not entirely accurate.
It's not entirely accurate. And, I mean, season 2 of Visions was actually admittedly good. Sure, there was still an episode or two where we're like, okay, this is Visions. Season 1 would be more, and even season 1, it wasn't like, we just weren't ready.
Well, for you, I listen. Let's see, the only one I probably say out of that probably will be close to how I feel about Visions would be Tokyo Drift.
Yeah. I don't know, I kind of like Tokyo Drift, though.
But I don't know. But then there's that one when they went in outer space, and that one was stupid.
Well, don't forget the stupid like submarine thing too, where they're chasing down a submarine.
Yeah.
I mean, I would definitely say, like, I actually liked Fast 10. I thought that was still over the top action stuff, but at least they had a story there. And I think that was the one that was sort of a sequel to 5. I think it was a sequel to 5. And I like that, because I thought 5 actually was one of the better ones. Obviously, the first 2 are the best.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to choose another one, like, I love 5. I thought 5 was incredible. I actually like 7 quite a bit. I thought 7 was really good. Other than that, though, they're fun. I don't think anybody's going to be like, that's a great movie. Why is that not an Oscar contender? I have no idea why. And then Ronaldo. This is good. Come on, pop in their comment. Here we go. Ronaldo says, Fast and Furious 10 Star Wars coming soon. Yeah, right? Episode 10. Don't forget. Right. See, actually, that would be a good thing, too. Which do you hate more, like Fast 8 or like Star Wars Episode 9?
Ooh.
Notice because it's Ronaldo, I didn't say 8. I left The Last Jedi alone.
Right.
We won't beat up on it tonight. But all right, yeah, be sure to join us tomorrow. Should be on at 8 o'clock. I'm almost hesitant to even give times anymore, the way things are going right now. But yeah, just look for us live tomorrow. That's why you guys want to click the notification bell. I'm telling you that right now. I mean, besides liking and subscribing and all the stuff we usually ask you to do, you're really going to want to hit that notification bell now, because that way you'll actually be able to keep up with when we're on and everything, and as long as our schedule is in a weird flux. Until we can become full-time YouTubers, and then it'll be the same all the time. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.